Two crews had already walked off this job before the company called me. I do property cleanouts, foreclosures, evictions, estate sales, and whatever's left behind when the people are gone. I box it up and haul it out. Normally it's crew work, 2 or 3 guys in a dumpster, but this house had been sitting empty since the bank took it, and 2 separate crews had started and quit before finishing. When that happens, the company stops sending crews and starts calling guys individually until somebody says yes. I was the third call, maybe the fifth. I didn't care enough to find out. Look, I was behind on child support and I had a custody hearing coming, and if I didn't show up to that hearing with some money paid down, I was going to lose my weekends with Sophie. So I wasn't exactly in a position to be picky about which jobs I took. When they said solo, I said fine, and when they said overnight, I said fine, and I would have said fine to a lot worse. I mean, what's the worst that happens? A body in the walls? I found one of those before. You just rope off the room and call the cops and they deal with it. One night, everything out by morning. I can do that. 14 Briarwood Lane. The neighborhood had its porch lights on, somebody's sprinkler going 2 houses down, minivans in the driveways, and then this place sitting at the end of the street like a tooth nobody bothered to pull. You could see the neglect from the driveway. Lawn gone, gutters hanging off one side, siding buckled where water had been getting in for years. 70s colonial, and the whole thing had that look where you know nobody touched it for a long time before the bank even got involved. I've cleared out enough of these to know the story. Marriage falls apart, or somebody dies, or somebody just gives up, and the house sits there getting worse until a guy like me shows up with boxes and tape. I checked my phone before getting out because Sophie had called while I was driving. She's 12, my daughter, and I had meant to call her back, but the drive kept going and I kept thinking I would do it when I stopped. Couldn't now, even if I wanted to, because the signal was dead out here. It happens sometimes, and I told myself I would call her after the job, which is what I always told myself, after the next job, after the next check, after I got caught up. Always after. My hands were stiff getting out of the truck, and my ribs on the left side had this deep ache under the muscle that wouldn't let go. I hadn't slept in long enough that I had stopped keeping track, just running jobs back to back, trying to get ahead of the hearing, so I grabbed the boxes from the truck bed and figured the lifting would shake it loose, because it usually does. Front door was unlocked. I set the boxes in the foyer and walked toward the kitchen, and the lights came on before I touched anything. Fluorescence, the overhead kind, just humming to life as I stepped through the doorway. Then, the furnace kicked on somewhere below me, and warm air came through the vents. And when I turned the faucet to wash my hands, the water ran clear. Nobody paying the bills for who knows how long, and everything just woke up. Probably the bank keeping the utilities on so the cleanup crews could actually work, because otherwise, nobody's taking this job. I didn't think about it much. I was here to finish what I came for, not figure out who was paying the electric bill. I walked the ground floor, figured out my exits and where I would stage everything so I wouldn't get jammed up hauling boxes through a tight hallway. Kitchen and living room off to the left, through an archway, one big open space. Stairs going up, 2 doors at the top, both closed. Smaller than I expected, but they always are. Ground floor first, work your way up. I popped the first box, taped the bottom, and walked into the kitchen and stopped. The table was set. 2 places, plates, and glasses. Napkins folded beside the silverware. A pot on the stove with the lid on. The glasses still had condensation on the outside. 2 chairs pulled in, one pushed out from the table. Whatever, I set the empty box on the floor and started clearing. I started with the pot because that was going to be the worst of it. House sitting empty for who knows how long, whatever was in there had probably gone to science by now, and I wanted to get it over with before the smell got into everything else. So I lifted the lid and braced for it, and it was soup. Chicken soup, still warm, steam curling off the surface. What the hell? That didn't make any sense at all. But I wasn't thinking about that because the smell caught me somewhere behind my chest and just sat there. This feeling like I had walked into a room I used to know, but couldn't remember when or why. I stood there with the lid in my hand trying to figure out what a pot of fresh soup in a dead foreclosure was doing to me, and I couldn't get there. I dumped it down the sink, but the soup wasn't what was bothering me anymore. That pot was fresh, which meant someone had been here recently, and I've been in enough foreclosures to know you don't mess around with squatters. Protocol says you back out and call the cops. But I still didn't have a signal and the job needed to be done by morning, so I told myself I would keep my eyes open and get in the truck if anything felt wrong. I rinsed the pot, wrapped the bowls from the dish rack, cleared the glasses, and started on the cabinets, working through it the way I always do. Hands moving, head quiet, get to the next thing. Then I picked up one of the plates and my hands went still. I knew this plate. Not from looking at it, from holding it, the weight, the balance of it, the rim under my fingers. I turned it over and ran my thumb along the bottom, and there was the ridge, dried super glue, rough where the seam was because I'm the one who put it there. Sophie was 3, and she grabbed this plate off the counter, wanting to help clear dinner, and it slipped and cracked on the tile. I sat on the kitchen floor with a tube of super glue holding the pieces together until the bond set, while Vanessa swept up the chips I couldn't save. These were our wedding dishes, and the soup on the stove was Vanessa's mother's recipe, the one she made when somebody in the house was having a rough day, and that's what I had been smelling and couldn't place because I hadn't been in the kitchen with that smell in years. I mean, I hadn't slept in 30 some hours? Your brain does things when you push it that far, finds patterns, makes connections that aren't there. Some stranger's kitchen with some stranger's dishes, and my head's just filling in the blanks because it's too tired to know the difference, right? That's all this was. I wrapped the plate in newspaper and put it on the box, then the next one, faster each time. I turned to grab more newspaper and the door frame was right there. Pencil marks going up the wood, Sophie's growth chart. I know my own handwriting, blocky capitals, carpenter's print, and the first marks were mine. Sophie at 2, 3, 4, then the letters changed, rounder and softer, and that was Vanessa's. Sophie at 5, 6, 7, 8. And after that, a third hand I didn't recognize, neater and smaller, measuring my daughter from 9 all the way up to 12. The exact year my handwriting stopped, I could see it right there on the wood. Whoever picked up after me hadn't missed a single one. You can't put a door frame in a box, so I moved on. The fridge had a drawing on it, old and curling at the edges, held up by a magnet from a pizza place that probably closed years ago. Crayon on construction paper, a stick figure in a hard hat standing next to a square with a triangle on top, and underneath in big wobbly letters she had spelled it the way a little kid does. Half the vowels missing and all the letters different sizes. My dad builds houses. She made that when she was 5, maybe 6. I came home on a Friday and she grabbed my hand before I even got my boots off and pulled me straight to the fridge, pointed at it, told me the hard hat was yellow because mine was yellow. So I picked her up to see it up close and she put her hand on my face and turned it toward the drawing because I wasn't looking fast enough. I didn't touch it. I turned back toward the counter and the kitchen was full. Vanessa was at the stove stirring something with her hair pulled back, and Sophie was on the floor, little, couldn't have been more than 4, pushing a toy truck across the linoleum and making engine noises with her mouth, and I was at the table, the other me, bigger than I am now, arms thicker, face not as drawn, looking at my phone while a cup of coffee went cold beside my hand. Sophie crossed the truck into the cabinet and laughed at herself, and Vanessa glanced down and smiled without breaking her rhythm at the stove, and the me at the table didn't look up. Then the phone on the wall rang. Vanessa picked it up and turned halfway from the table, and I watched her shoulders change. Her voice went quiet, and I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see her free hand pressed flat against the counter, and the me at the table was still on his phone, still not looking up. I blinked, and they were gone. Vanessa and Sophie and the truck on the floor, and the other me, all of it. Just the empty kitchen again, and the fluorescent hum and newspaper on the counter where I left it. I stood there for a while after that with my hands at my sides because I didn't know what to do with them. Wrapping dishes wasn't going to cut it after what I just saw. What the fuck is happening to me? I took a load out to the truck, and when I came back the table had 3 settings. 2 when I left, and now 3. Third chair pulled out, seat still warm, and when I put my hand on it, third glass with condensation running down the side. Okay, I dumped the water and wrapped the glass and put it in the box because that was all I knew how to do with it. There was a stack of paper under a magnet on the counter that I almost packed before I caught my name on the top one. Pay stubs from my company with the overtime columns full and a receipt for Sophie's school supplies from September. The electric bill for this house, my account number at the bottom, and Vanessa's car insurance renewal with me still listed as the payer. I put them in the box with everything else. Most of the kitchen was done by then. I had gone through it faster than I should have, wrapping things too tight, taping boxes with more passes than they needed. I wasn't going to stand here and figure out how this was possible. I had tried that already, and it didn't get me anywhere. The dishes were mine, the soup was Vanessa's recipe, the height marks were Sophie's. I could keep telling myself my brain was making connections that weren't there, but my brain didn't put superglue on the bottom of that plate. And I didn't want to fight it. I don't know how to say this except that some part of me, standing in that kitchen with the boxes taped shut around me, wanted to keep going. Wanted to see what else was here. Not because it made sense, but because it was mine and I hadn't seen any of it in a long time. I left, just a short, dry sound in an empty kitchen, and I don't even know what was funny. I didn't know what the hell I was doing anymore, but I picked up the last box and walked toward the archway. When I looked through into the living room, there was my couch, with the cushions worn into the same shapes. My TV still mounted on the wall, slightly crooked, my tools leaning against the far wall, and running along the ceiling where the wall met the top, crown molding. Somebody had installed it. Badly. The coat cuts were wrong. I could feel it under my fingers where the joints met. Too much angle, not enough relief. And whoever did it had filled the gaps with caulk instead of going back and recutting. Whoever did it watched the video and bought a miter saw. First few cuts were cautious and clean, but then they got confident and started rushing. And by the corners, they were just gunking filler into everything and hoping paint covers it. I had promised Vanessa I would do this 10 years ago, maybe longer. She wanted crown molding in the living room because her mother's house had it, and I said, yeah, I'll get to it, the way I said I would get to a lot of things. And somebody got to it. Did it wrong, too. Didn't know what they were doing, but did it anyway. And the filler was sanded and painted, and you wouldn't notice from the floor, but I could feel every bad joint from where I was standing with my hand on the ceiling. So I got to work on the living room. The couch was mine, and I knew it before I touched it because the left cushion had that lean, where the springs gave out and I never replaced them. Just kept sitting in the same spot until the foam took my shape. TV still on the wall, still crooked. I mounted it in a hurry one Sunday, and Vanessa said it was off by 2 degrees, and I told her nobody would notice, and she said she would. My tools against the far wall in a canvas bag. I didn't need to open it to know it was mine. Nobody had touched them. I started breaking down the shelves, books first, paperbacks, mostly Vanessa's, some of Sophie's school readings stacked sideways. I pulled them in armfuls and dropped them flat into a box without checking the spines, because I wasn't going to stand there reading titles in a house that was making me feel like I had swallowed something I couldn't get back up. My brother Kevin's jacket was on the armrest of my couch, Carhartt, brown, the duck canvas kind. I had bought him that jacket, bought him one every Christmas because he burned through them. His boots were by the door, his cigarettes on the coffee table, and there was a mug on the side table with a ring stain burned into the wood underneath. The mug said number 1 uncle. I put it in the box without wrapping it, and I didn't care if it broke. My hands were shaking, and the rest of me wasn't far behind. His keys were by the door next to the boots. Not a spare hidden under a rock, a key on his ring because he lived here. Every item went into the box, and every item was another thing I had to put my hands on. And I'm telling you, knowing something is one thing, but having to touch it is different. And the third handwriting on the door frame, I could see it from here, through the archway, those neat letters measuring Sophie from 9 to 12. Come on, I already knew. I had known since I saw the jacket. Kevin's handwriting, Kevin's measurements. Kevin standing my daughter against the frame once a year and marking her height the way I used to. The TV turned on. Just for a second, blue light flooding the wall, canned laughter from something, then gone. I turned and the screen was dark. The TV wasn't even plugged in. I went back to the shelves and pulled books faster, and something moved in the archway. When I turned, there was nobody there, but I felt the air shift against my arm, like someone had walked past close enough to touch. Seriously. I stood there holding a stack of paperbacks and waiting for something to explain itself, and nothing did, so I put the books in the box. Then something clicked on in the kitchen. An answering machine on the counter by the phone. Old one, the kind with the little tape inside. And I hadn't noticed it before because it was behind the knife block. The tape hissed for a second, and Vanessa's voice came through the speaker, and everything in me went still. She sounded tired, not angry or upset or anything, just tired. Bone tired, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. She said Sophie had a thing at school Thursday, and she knew I was probably at work. Sophie wouldn't say it, but she really wanted me there. Call me back when you can. Then a pause. I could hear the TV going in the background. something with a laugh track, a door closing somewhere in the house, and Kevin in the background, easy, like he lived there. Tell him I fixed the back door. She didn't answer him. The message ended with a click, and the tape stopped. He fixed the back door. That was all he said, and he said it like it was his door too. I pulled the tape out of the machine and put it in my pocket. Then I just stood there because I didn't know what else to do. After a while, I went back to the living room and stopped being careful. I wanted this part done. Wanted to get through whatever was left down here as fast as I could because there were still 2 doors at the top of those stairs, and I knew what was behind at least one of them. And some part of me that I didn't want to listen to was already pulling me toward it. The rest of the books went in flat, and I didn't care if the spines cracked. I ripped the canvas tool bag off the wall without unzipping it, and threw it in a box and heard something break inside, and didn't check what. Shelves cleared in handfuls. Picture frames went in face down so I didn't have to see what was in them. I taped the boxes with 5 passes instead of 3, and carried them out 2 at a time, slamming through the screen door with my shoulder because using my hands would have meant putting something down, and I couldn't stop moving or I was going to put my fist through the drywall. I came back in for the last load and the living room was full. Kevin was on my couch, Vanessa beside him with her feet tucked under his leg, reading something on her phone, and his hand was on her ankle, absent, comfortable, resting there, because his hand knew where she was without him thinking about it. The TV was on and neither of them was watching it. Sophie walked through from the kitchen, carrying a glass of water, and said something to Kevin as she passed, and he answered without looking up, and she laughed. Short, nothing, something you would forget 5 minutes later, and kept walking toward the stairs. Vanessa reached over and fixed Kevin's collar where it was folded under. He tilted his head to give her room and went back to whatever he was reading. None of it was for anyone's benefit, just a family on a Tuesday night doing nothing worth remembering. I stood in the archway holding an empty box and watched them. My couch, my TV, my living room, with Kevin's hand on my wife's ankle, and my daughter laughing at something my brother said. Easy and comfortable and gone before it landed, because that's what Tuesday nights are. Nothing. You don't remember them. You don't save them. They just happen. 1,000 of them, and nobody counts them because why would you count a Tuesday? And then you're standing in an archway watching someone else have them, and you trade every overtime check you ever cashed to be the guy on that couch who isn't even paying attention. Then it was gone. Bare walls and the bare floor and the boxes I'd packed lined up by the door. I put the empty box down because there was nothing left to put in it. The anger was gone too, and what was left was quieter, and I couldn't work my way through it because working harder wasn't going to touch this. So I stood there for a while in the empty room with the bad crown molding above me and the height marks on the door frame behind me and the fridge drawing still curling under its magnet. And none of those were going in a box because you can't pack what's built into the walls. I walked past the stairs without looking up, through the foyer, out the front door, across the lawn, to the truck. Done. Whatever that was, whatever just happened in that living room, it was done. And I was leaving, and that was the end of it. The air was cold and my hands were shaking when I got the key in the ignition, but the engine turned over fine and I backed out the driveway and drove. Briarwood Lane went straight for 2 blocks. Street lights and parked cars. Somebody's recycling bin tipped over at the curb. Normal. I took the curve at the end of the road, bent left, and then right, and then the sign was there again. Briarwood Lane. Same driveway, same house. Porch light on. Front door open. I sat there for a second, and then I drove again, faster, and this time I took the first turn I saw. A right onto a street I didn't bother reading the sign for, and the road went straight, and then it curved, and I was looking at Briarwood Lane. Same driveway, same house. Third time I floored it. Took every turn the opposite way, left where I went right, right where I went left. Drove for whatever felt like a full minute in a straight line with the needle climbing. The road curved. Briarwood Lane. Can't leave, can I? I turned off the engine and sat in the driveway with my hands on the wheel. Through the windshield, the house. Porch light still on. Front door still open. Through the rear view, the street that went everywhere and nowhere. I got out and stood in the cold for a long time, just breathing. No clouds in front of my face. Just the dark and the quiet and the neighbor's sprinkler 2 houses down, still going in that same steady arc. I looked up at the second floor. 2 doors, both still closed. Then I went back inside. The hallway at the top of the stairs was small. Carpet worn flat in a track between the 2 doors, pile rubbed down to nothing from years of feet going back and forth, And the light up here was different. A wall sconce instead of fluorescent, warmer, this yellow that made the walls feel close. I stopped at the first door and my hand went to the knob and stayed there. I didn't turn it. The house was quiet up here. Whatever the furnace was doing downstairs didn't reach this floor, and the refrigerator hum and the clock and all the rest of it, gone. Just me and a closed door and the carpet under my boots and nothing else. I knew what was behind it. I had known since the kitchen, probably, and everything after that just made it harder to pretend I didn't. A kid lived in this room, and it was my kid, and whatever was on the other side of this door was going to be worse than the kitchen, and worse than the living room, and worse than Kevin's voice on that tape, saying he fixed the back door like it was nothing. $2,200. 2 rooms left. Done by 9. I kept trying to hold on to that because it was the only math I had, but the numbers wouldn't stay. 9 wasn't real, and the road looped back, and I was standing in my own hallway, clearing out my own life, and I didn't know what I was earning anymore or who was paying for it. I turned the handle anyway, because Dean Kowalski finishes the job. That's all I had left, and it was enough to get my hand moving. The air changed the second the door swung in. Warmer than the hallway, and softer. Fabric softener or that lotion that comes in the purple bottle, the kind that gets into everything, sheets and towels and stuffed animals, until the whole room just smells like your kid. A crib in the far corner with a mobile above it, stars and moons on thin wire. Turning slow, even though the window was shut and there wasn't a vent anywhere near it. Just turning. And across the room, a twin bed with a purple comforter, pulled up neat and a stuffed dog on the pillow. Brown, floppy-eared, one ear chewed down to the nub, and the other one still fuzzy. I had never seen that dog. I didn't know its name, or when she got it, or if she held on to it at night, and I was standing in the doorway, looking at the crib and the bed in the same room, and I couldn't tell you the first thing about the toy on her pillow. I stepped into the room, and the walls hit me. Drawings. Dozens of them, layered and overlapping, taped and pinned and tacked to every surface. I could read them the way I read a building, bottom to top, oldest to newest. Crayon stick figures near the baseboards, big heads and no necks, 3 or 4 years old at most. Higher up, the markers came in, horses mostly, horses everywhere, and then colored pencil higher still, where the lines got careful and the shapes started looking like what they were supposed to be. Family pictures near the top, 3 people in every one, a woman with long hair, a small girl, and a man. Brown hair, shorter than the woman. I looked at 5 or 6 of them, and the man was in all of them, and it wasn't me. I started to reach for one of the drawings, and then I stopped, put my hands in my pockets instead. I could have pulled them down, folded them, boxed them. That's what I was here to do, but I couldn't make myself take down my daughter's drawings off her wall and put them in a cardboard box. There was a corkboard above the desk, and I almost didn't look, but my eyes were already there. A homework assignment pinned to it. My Family, by Sophie Kowalski. She wrote about Mom, how she works at the hospital, and she's tired a lot, but she always reads to me. Then a cat named Pretzel, and I didn't even know they had a cat. And Kevin, he lives with us and makes funny pancakes on Saturdays, and he's teaching me to ride a bike, but I already know how, and I just don't tell him. That was her family. Mom, and the cat, and Kevin. She described everyone who lived in her house, and I wasn't in it. And it wasn't angry or pointed or anything. I just wasn't there the same way you wouldn't list someone who moved away. A toy phone on the bedside table, pink plastic, oversized buttons, something a toddler would use. It clicked on by itself and I almost didn't listen because what's a toy phone going to do? But then, Sophie's voice came through the speaker and she was young, 8 maybe, bright and fast and tripping over the words because she was excited. Hi Daddy, Mommy said you might come Saturday. Can we go to the park? The one with the big slide. Okay, call me back, bye. And this giggle at the end before the phone beeped. I stood there. The phone beeped again, and Sophie was older, 10, careful with the words in a way she wasn't before, like she had rehearsed it. Hey Dad, just wondering if you're still coming this weekend. Mom said maybe. Can you let me know? Okay, bye. No giggle. I sat down on the bed because my legs weren't going to hold me for the rest of this. Third message, and her voice was almost someone else's. 12, flat. Hey, it's me. Don't worry about Saturday. I made plans already. Talk later, I guess. The phone didn't stop. One more message, and this one was different. Younger than the first one. 6, maybe. And it wasn't a voicemail. It was Sophie in the room with someone, close to the phone, and she was crying. Not screaming or throwing a fit, but the hiccupy, confused kind where a kid doesn't understand what's happening and can't stop asking the one question nobody can answer. Why doesn't Daddy come home anymore? I don't want Uncle Kevin. I want Daddy. And Vanessa, so tired she could barely hold the words up. I know, baby. I know. The phone clicked off. I didn't say anything. I don't think I could have. I don't know why I got up. There was a photo tucked into the frame of Sophie's mirror, and I walked over and pulled it out. And it was me and Sophie, and maybe she was 5, holding up a fish with both hands and grinning so hard her eyes were shut, missing her front tooth. I was kneeling beside her with my hand on her shoulder, and we had the same stupid grin, and the sun was behind us, and it was a good day. I remember that day. I went back to the bed and sat down, and my hands weren't moving, and the inventory voice that I'd been running all night tried to start somewhere in the back of my head and couldn't get going, like an engine turning over and dying. I just sat there with the fish and the grin and the missing tooth and the sun, and the room was quiet. And then he showed me something else. Sophie was sitting in the arm of the chair by the front window, 9, maybe 10, jeans and sneakers and a hoodie. Her backpack was by the front door. She was watching the driveway, not staring at it. She had this way of leaning against the window frame where she could see outside without looking like she was looking. And the driveway was empty and the street was quiet, and she sat there with her chin on her hand and waited. The phone rang. She didn't move, didn't look at it, didn't get up. Just sat there while it rang, and then the answering machine clicked on in the kitchen, and my voice came through the speaker. Hey, Soph. I got a job that ran long, but I'll make it up to you next weekend, okay? I promise. I sounded tired, and I meant it. I know I meant it because I always meant it, every single time. And it never once made a goddamn difference. Sophie's face didn't change. She nodded once, small, almost to herself. Then she got up and went to her room. She took off her sneakers and set them by the bed, side by side, laces tucked in, took the backpack off her shoulder, and hung it in the closet and closed the door. Pulled the hoodie over her head and folded it and set it on the chair. Everything where it came from. She didn't slam anything and she didn't cry. Then it was gone and I was on the bed again. Last spring, Sophie had a school play and I showed up late and sat in the back row. She found me after in the lobby and her face did this thing. Not surprised, not happy, more like she was recalculating. Oh, you came. Not mean, not sarcastic. The O of a kid who stopped putting you on the list and now had to figure out what to do with you standing there. I put the photo on the bed where I'd been sitting, walked out and closed Sophie's door behind me. Down the stairs, past the kitchen, out the front door. I turned the key and backed out the driveway, and I already knew. The road curved and Briarwood Lane was right here, same as before. I pulled into the driveway and put it in park and sat there with the engine running. First time I tried 3. Floored it, took every turn the wrong way, drove until the needle was shaking. Didn't matter. I could try 10 more and the street would curve and the sign would be there and the house would be waiting with the porch light on and the door open. So I sat there, engine running, hands on the wheel, looking at the house through the windshield. Sophie's window was dark, the other window, the second door, the one I never opened, had a light on, warm, steady, like a bedroom lamp someone left on for you. I didn't turn that light on. I was never in that room. The engine was idling and my hands were on the wheel and I was doing exactly what I always do. Get in the truck, drive somewhere, anywhere. The next job, the next check, the next town over where nobody needs anything from me and I can keep my hands busy until whatever it is stops hurting. That's the whole playbook, and it's the only one I've got, and I've been running it my entire life. And it works until you're sitting in a driveway watching your daughter put her sneakers away side by side because she learned it from you. Not the sneakers, the leaving, the putting things back where they came from and closing the door quietly and not making a scene about it. I turned off the engine. Sat there for a while in the quiet. No road noise, no engine, no radio. Just the tick of the motor cooling down and the dark and that warm light in the upstairs window. I got out, closed the door, went back inside and up the stairs. The second door, light showing warm underneath it. I put my hand on the knob and it was warm too. I opened it. The room was wrong. I knew it the way I know a floor isn't level before I check. Something in the proportions, the ceiling too low on one side and angled down, the whole space too narrow and too long. Not a bedroom. Not anything I could name standing in the doorway. Window on the far wall with a crack running corner to corner. Through it, I could see something outside, trees maybe, but they didn't look right, like they were frozen and moving at the same time. A bed against the wall under the window. The headboard was metallic, tubular, angled wrong, too upright, too close. A round shape at the top of it. A small mirror on the wall above the bed, rectangular, tilted down. The floor under my boots wasn't carpet, but it was something tighter, woven, commercial, and everything in the room had this slight forward lean like the whole space was pitched at an angle that shouldn't be there. My brain did the thing it does, reflex, the one part of me that still knew how to work. The headboard wasn't a headboard, it was a column, tubular steel angled with the round shape at the top, and the round shape was a wheel, steering wheel. The column was the steering column, the mirror was the rear view, the window was the windshield, and the crack running corner to corner was the crack running corner to corner. And the trees outside weren't frozen, they were still because the truck wasn't moving anymore. The floor was the bench seat, the lean was the impact. The room was the cab of my truck. There was a shape under the covers, human-sized still, and a jacket sleeve hung past the edge of the seat, canvas brown, same weight as the one I was wearing. A boot at the foot of the bed with the laces loose, same boots I was standing in. I didn't pull the covers back, I didn't need to. Route 9, the curve past the county line, where the utility poles sit close to the shoulder. I could see it, not like a memory, more like something leaking back in. My hands on the wheel and the road bending, and my eyes not tracking fast enough because I hadn't slept in 30-some hours, and the $2,200 kept me driving when everything in my body was telling me to stop. The ribs on my left side, not from lifting boxes, from the steering column. The hands that were stiff getting out of the truck, they were stiff getting into it too. They were stiffed because they stopped working on the wheel. And then everything else came apart. The phone. No signal since I got here because I never got here. Sophie's name on the screen, and the screen was cracked because the windshield was cracked and the call never went through, and she was going to check her phone in the morning and see nothing. I never felt hungry, not once, all night. Never thirsty. I worked for hours carrying boxes and never once stopped to drink water or eat or rest, and I didn't think about it because Dean Kowalski doesn't stop. My breath, standing outside in the cold after the road looped the first time. No clouds in front of my face. I noticed. I didn't think about it again. The boxes, every trip out to the truck down the driveway, and I never heard the tailgate. Never heard anything land out there because there was nothing out there to land on. There was no road, no Briarwood Lane, no neighborhood with porch lights and sprinklers and recycling bins at the curb. The house was quiet. First time all night. No furnace, no hum, no clock in the kitchen, no sound of anyone living anywhere in the building. Not empty quiet, finished quiet. There were no boxes in this room, nothing to wrap or tape or carry. I walked to the bed and sat down on the edge, and the mattress gave under me with a lean to the left, springs in the same places, the same shape. I took out my phone. The screen was cracked worse than I thought, and Sophie's missed call was still there. Her name, the timestamp from earlier tonight when she called, and I was driving, and I was going to call her back after the job. After. I sat there holding the phone, looking at her name, and the house was done, and I was done, and there was nothing left to inventory or calculate or pack. Just a room that was a truck, and a body that was mine, and a phone that was never going to connect. I don't ask for things, I never have. I handle them, and I provide, and I work. And that's supposed to be the deal. That's supposed to be enough, but I wanted to come back. I wanted to call her back. Be the guy in the kitchen who looked out from his phone when Vanessa's shoulders changed. Show up on Saturday and take my daughter to the park with the big slide and just be there already, not making the call, not saying next weekend. Somewhere outside the house, past whatever any of this was, something was making a sound. Far away and thin and getting closer. And it didn't belong to the house because the house was done. It was coming from the other side, from Route 9, from the road, from wherever I was still sitting behind that wheel. I want to come back. Please, let me come back.